I am the head of innovation. I work in the digital reporting and taxonomies team in regulatory standards. So particularly in the Codex project, I was leading the part around creating a toolkit for regulatory use, initially as a sandbox and now thinking about how we roll it out more widely across the organization. Yeah, so the UK has been a kind of global leader for structured data, and it's been building over time. Initially, HMRC mandate bringing in millions and millions of individual entities. More latterly, we've had companies house reporting on a voluntary basis and FCA listed company reporting. So there's lots and lots of structured data, but what we haven't been able to do is pipeline that data into a platform that we can use for insights. And so that's what we really wanted to test out in this project is, can we take that XBRL data, use the structure that's embedded within it to build accessible insights for regulators. So, like many agile projects, we had an initial sort of discovery phase. And so one of those key areas, particularly with XBRL data, is converting it from the format that it comes into something that is more usable within in a database structure. And so we tried, some of the open source models. We tried some of the kind of currently available tools. What we quickly found is it's complex and it requires a lot of expertise, and we're moving at scale with a project like this, and so we needed to have somebody who could support us both with the expertise and the technology. So taking that XBRL problem and turning it into kind of a set of data that we could work with. So a project like this is relatively unique, and that's actually one of the reasons we got it funded, because it's sort of a regulatory pioneers funding that we used for the project. So we hadn't done large scale projects like this. We'd experimented a little bit with the data, and we really had a view that there would be value in it, but we hadn't gone through a big process of bringing it in scale, and particularly not working with all of the other regulators. So we had 4 different regulators involved, lots of people, lots of teams, and bringing all of that kind of need and desire and demand together and being able to deliver to that on a short time scale, that is not something that is usual to deliver. So it was quite unique from our perspective. So thinking through kind of the key aspects of the project, some of the things that made it difficult or challenging. So we had many business users involved, and they didn't know anything about XBRL. They're not thinking about XBRL in an XBRL way. So what we have to deliver is data that makes sense to them and matches their use cases. And so we spent a lot of work on the data model and making sure that that kind of connected up. It was agile. So we needed to work at speed and at pace and run through the various stages on a quick basis, delivering kind of minimum viable product, but then quickly scaling up to something that worked on a sort of a longer term basis. And we're also talking about millions and millions of data points and hundreds of thousands of sets of accounts. So every month it's about 25,000 accounts that get filed that fit into our process, and so that's a big pipeline of data, and then pulling all of those different data sets out, processing them, that's kind of a key aspect. So we probably have around 2.5 million data points as well every quarter. And I guess one of the key things about our implementation, we're talking about such a wide variety of accounts and such a wide variety of data. So listed accounts, they might have 1,000 complex data points. Small accounts might have 8 data points. And how do you have a process and a scale and a project and a product that can work through all of those various kind of different iterations. So that was one of the key pieces. And then really taking that data, turning it into a data model, and then connecting it up to something that people are used to, things like dashboards, and really testing out whether that data worked for them. So that's kind of one area where we had to enhance the data. We had to add extra data sources outside of the XBRL data to really get that kind of business value out of it. In my mind, I always start with the dashboard. In my mind, I already had the dashboards in mind, but we started with the data and then we worked through a process to understand what those would look like, how they would work, what kinds of data you need in them. And I think that's one of the places where I would say, people will say, well, why don't you just buy an off-the-shelf product that does all of this in one thing? And I think we really learned a lot and gained a lot from experimenting with the data ourselves, understanding it, connecting it up, and trying to use it. And you don't get that level of engagement. You wouldn't get that level of engagement if you were just buying a product that did 3 or 4 different things that gave you some sets of data. It's actually the process of taking it, crafting it, honing it, building it into something you can use that really, I think makes that kind of cultural difference in an organization. That means that we will use this data going forward. I mean, I think, there's a question of knowing what you need, and we are at that stage where we needed to experiment with the data, understand the different parts of the data rather than everything. So if we just had a pipeline that does everything, that wouldn't have been that helpful because it would have been too much for us to figure out. And what we really needed to think about was, specifically what data do we have, what's the quality around it, what works, how do we connect it up, and we needed to run through that process to really make it something that we could use and utilize and rely on for decisions. So I think what we really valued was the kind of partnership that we had. So it wasn't just Reportix acting as a vendor and giving us, the thing that we said that we needed. It was more of a discussion, and it was an engagement, and it was an experimentation between us as to what would work, how it would work, how we could connect it up. And so that relationship piece was the bit that I think was really valuable. And there was, other vendors involved as well, building other pieces, and it was that kind of collaborative team engagement that we could all come together and talk through the issues that really meant that we could deliver on time. So I mean, the overall approach that we had was an agile approach. So starting with discovery, putting a lot of work in to sort of understand needs and uses, and it wasn't, let's just say this is the data that we have and this is what it, and therefore this is what we're stuck with. It was really, what is the need and how do we shape and connect and aggregate the data in a way that supports that use case and answers that use case. And so that agile approach, that experimentation approach, that's, I think, the thing that really added value to the overall process. And so I think that's, that's one of the challenges for organizations thinking about this kind of thing, is that often you build a business case that says, I must deliver X, and you don't have that freedom to experiment. And I think in this case, you needed the freedom to experiment, to try out and connect things, to see what worked and what didn't work. And if you don't have that kind of agile experimental mindset, it's difficult to deliver. I mean, I think the kind of elephant in the room from our project perspective was AI. And so, we started the project before AI was the kind of zeitgeist. And I think if we were looking at the project again now, we would be thinking about, where does AI fit into the process? How can we build it in? Can it support us in providing a different type of interface for the questions of the users. So we've been doing it using Power BI and visualizations, but natural language questions, these kinds of things are things that people naturally begin to think about. The rest of the project, I don't think I would have changed that much, because actually, getting an understanding of the quality of the data, where it needs to be connected, you can only do that by getting your hands dirty and trying to build it. But certainly AI would have been the thing that we would have looked at. So, XBRL itself is quite unique. It's not a thing that many vendors have access to or have used. So, fundamentally, we were looking at a relatively small pool to start with. Um, I think the next thing is speaking to a vendor and understanding whether they really understand what we're talking about. There will be people who say, we know that, we can do that, we can deliver, we can do it on time, we can do it on budget. But you really need to get the sense that they have the understanding, because it's a complex area, and it's complex for a reason, because the data is rich, and it's rich in particularly accounting and reporting meaning, and so you need someone who understands that meaning. Yeah, so I think when we went into this project overall and across the regulators, we were expecting that the costs might be prohibitive, because what you often hear is big box solutions that deliver something akin to what we're talking about, but in a kind of end-to-end way. And some regulators that absolutely make sense if you're collecting lots and lots of data and lots of sets of accounts. When the kind of thing we're doing is quite bespoke, it's smaller, you need to be more agile, and it needed to be, I guess, connected to the kind of IT infrastructure that we already had. So looking for something that was smaller, a bit more bite-sized, a bit more manageable was the right approach. I think really, so FRC itself, we set the taxonomy, and actually using it in anger to try and answer regulatory questions really demonstrated a different light on the data and the collection of the data and what quality means for the data. And that is really a valuable set of insights that we've gained through the project. And then I think it's also that attitude that we now have, that actually we can do things that are a bit more complex. We can have a go at connecting things up using data, using tools, which, as a smaller regulator, it's not something we would typically have done. So that confidence to try something is also another, really positive outcome. So so in fact, only yesterday we released the first version of it across our organization. So it's been in a sandbox. We've now released it across the organization. Sort of 450 people now have access to it, and we're building out our roadmap for further iterations to help answer regulatory questions. So it's being used right now, and it hasn't fallen over as far as I can tell from my emails. So I would say, these guys really understand the XBRL data. They don't just like XBRL; they love XBRL, and you know they're also able though to translate that into business need and help you answer your business, output, request, requirement, and pair it up with what that means in terms of XBRL and the process that needs to be run through. So it's that business intelligence understanding combined with the XBRL expertise, which is unusual to find in a single vendor. I didn't even have to use ChatGPT to work out anything to do with XBRL. It was all done for me. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely thinking about, how we expand the XBRL data use within the organization, new types of questions, new types of queries, particularly because we have this, overall Azure architecture as well that we're combining the XBRL data with, finding other pots of data to connect it with and get more value out of. That's really our kind of key focus at the moment. And then obviously as we think further forward, AI and sustainability data, these are two key areas that are going to be developing, and thinking about how we connect all of that data together is where we would like to go.